Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Designs by Dana. I am Dana. Today I am working with this designer series paper from Stampin' Up. This is the Countryside Inn paper packet, and you can see it's very monochromatic here. And what I love about the Stampin' Up paper is that it does come with this thick kind of a cardstock here that tells you the name of the paper and all of the colors that are included. So this one has Boho Blue, Balmy Blue, Misty Moonlight, and Night of Navy included in this color palette. And here I have all of the papers laid out here and front and back shown here. So you can see all of the different patterns included. And so this is, you know, front, back, throughout the series here, and you can see all of the different patterns. So the layout that I'm going to do today is going to be a single page layout, and let me show you the picture that I'm going to do. So I think this paper is going to work perfectly for this kind of a monochromatic theme, and you can see most of the folks here in this photo are wearing different shades of blue, as well as the blue jeans that everybody's wearing. So it's going to work quite nicely with this. So as I go through and pick out my patterns that I'm going to use, I'm thinking that I, of course, want a nice mix of the darker blues and the lighter blues. I'm not particularly fond of these patterns that have the animals mixed in, so I'm probably going to pull these guys out and eliminate some of these. So here we've got, I think these are fox. We've got some birds and some bunnies. So I'll probably exclude these and then just pull in a mixture of the lights and the dark blues. So what I'm going to do is I have a vision, and I'm just going to use the front side of this sheet to kind of map out what I think I'm going to do with this page. So I'm going to have my picture kind of down here in this bottom left-hand corner of the page, because I'm going to work off of my rule of 3. So I want to block this off, you know, if this is the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third. So I'm going to kind of keep this down into the bottom third of the page. And then again, if I'm going to think about this as the left third, the center third, and the right third, I'm going to kind of keep towards the left third of the page. So that's how I'm going to kind of position the photo. And what I want to do is cut all of those patterns of paper into strips. And I want to create like a plaid background as a placement for my photo. So kind of an anchor for the photo behind here. So that's how we're going to start building this out. And then we'll see what comes out of that after I get that done and build out the layout. So that's my vision with this, and incorporating all of those different shades of blues and the monochromatic look to this page. So I'm going to start with that. We'll come back, see what it looks like, and build out from there. Okay, I decided to start with a white cardstock base, and before I start building up on that base, I'm going to use a blue shimmer brush and add several little speckle texture background effect to this base. So I'm moving that all around with my white protection piece of paper behind it, just so I don't get splatters on my desk. These are kind of hard to see on camera, but there are a lot of little splatters on this piece of cardstock. So I'm just going to turn that around because I got that one big splotch there on the left, and just kind of thinking about how I might be able to cover that up. Now I've pre-cut several strips of paper here that I'm going to use to make my little plaid grid pattern here. I decided to use the darker patterns going up and down in the vertical direction, and then I'm going to use only one pattern going in the horizontal direction, just so that it doesn't get to be too busy of a pattern. So the papers that I have going up and down, I think I cut it 7 or 7.5 inches, And then the horizontal papers I cut at 9 inches. And you will see when I get done here, I will do some trimming on those. And one of the things I wanted to be sure about when I do this is I don't want them all to be straight across or up and down as well. So I'm going to weave a couple of these in, and you can see how I'm wanting to get a pattern going. And then I will tack some of these down to get started, and then I'll build out from the top and the bottom for each of these. I'm just going to audition my photo in here to make sure that this is exactly the pattern that I want, and I'm happy with this before I build everything out. But you kind of get the idea of how I want this built out, and then I'm going to go ahead and build this little grid plaid pattern here. So I've got most of this built out for you, and I just want to show you exactly how I'm doing this. So I'm using my T ruler to make everything line up, and I'm putting about 1/4 inch in between each row. So that's helping my measurements as I move forward. And then as I add each row, I'm just using my liquid glue and I'm tacking them down sporadically under each strip where it crosses over the piece that I'm adding down. So you can see I just added a few dots of glue here and there just to tack it in place. And then you can see I'm doing some counting to see if I'm even or not. And I don't really need it to be even, but I just wanted to get a count for where I was at. And as I'm putting my photo in here, I decided that I really think I need one more down at the bottom. So bringing the ruler back in, measuring my space off, I'm going to bring one more at the bottom. And you can see how I just weave my piece in and out of each of the pattern papers. And you can see me lift those up, pull it down. And then again, I'm going to use the liquid glue to tack that down. And again, the glue choice is just personal preference. You may want to use your tape runner, your Stampin' Seal, whatever works best for you. I like to tack it down as I go, just so everything doesn't shift on me. But again, it's all just personal preference. So now that I have everything in place and where I want it, I'm going to put my photo in again and make sure this looks good. And I'm pretty happy with that. I haven't decided if my photo is going to go straight or at a little bit of an angle, but you can see that my top strips are clearly quite a bit longer than the bottom. So I need to give this a little bit of a haircut just to even everything out. And as I noted earlier, I don't want these to be straight across, so you can see how I'm kind of staggering these pieces here so that they're a little bit uneven, which is the intended look that I'm going for. And I think I decided that I want this right side to be a little bit trimmed down, just a hair to even that out. So I'm just eyeballing this side as well and just giving it a little bit of a trim. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just going to do a little bit more tacking down. Not that it's critical here, but just so these pieces, once they move around, they don't get bent up is really what I'm trying to avoid, keeping everything nice and flat. So I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. And then as I'm wrapping this up, I decided that it would make sense to add another little element of the same pattern in this upper right-hand corner. So I brought in 3 more strips using the same patterns. And these are actually scrap pieces that I cut off when I cut my original strips. So I was able to just use scrap. And I'm just going to quickly show you the same technique that I used to build out my larger space. I'm going to use to build out this space. So again, I put my first the darker strips down, and then I'm adding in my lighter strips. So this time they're going in the opposite directions. So my lighter strips are going to go vertical, and I'm just going to add 3, I think, in this space. Just to kind of carry that pattern through the page. And then we're going to, again, give it a little bit of a haircut in both directions and trim this down. So this will be a great spot as a grounding place for some additional embellishments. Normally, I might use this spot to add some tags or banners, but this way my pattern throughout the layout will kind of flow nicely on the page. So before I glue these pieces down, I'm going to go ahead and trim them down. And then as I trim down my darker pieces, I decided that it might look a little bit cool to give them a little bit of an angling to those. So I'm going to bring my scissors back in and angle those down. I was really happy with how my angle really flowed. So everything kind of just looks like kind of a continuous angle there. And we'll get those tacked down as well. So now I've got a nice little spot up there to add some embellishments, and I think it's going to work nicely. So I went to my stash for this layout, and I wanted to bring in some nice flowers, and I brought in this piece, and they do have a coordinating die cut with this stamp set. So I'm bringing in some scrap paper with my stamping apparatus and trim that down. And I wanted to cut, I think I picked 3 flowers from this one. So I'm going to position those here so I can stamp them all at one time and then use the die cuts to cut them out. And wouldn't you know, I decided that I cut my paper the wrong size. So I'm going to try to reposition that and see if I can get them all in here at one time. And I think that positioning is going to work a little bit better. So I'm just going to fiddle around with that a little bit, and then we can see that I can stamp all of those together, which is going to make it a lot easier than to mount them all on 3 individual blocks and do individual stamping. So this is just a nice way to speed up the process. And I'm going to do a couple of those smaller flowers as well to give me some nice good clusters. What I love about the Mitzi here is that I can ink this multiple times and restamp it. It stamps in the same spot until I get it as dark as I want. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more little ink to that and stamp it again, and I get a nice good dark crisp image. So I'm going to let that one dry, and I do want the smaller flowers. So I'm going to go ahead and just ink up those 2 small flowers again and stamp those again so I can have extra flowers for my clusters. I'm also going to do the leaves, but I will do those off camera. You guys get the idea of how this works, so you don't need to see me stamp up a bunch of leaves and get those cut out. So we'll get that moved out of the way. And then I'm just going to pull out those coordinating dies so that you can see how well they line up, and then we can get those cut out. I did want my flowers to coordinate with my pattern papers, so I pulled in some markers. I couldn't decide if I wanted to use markers or color pencils, or even a blending brush would be nice with this layout. So lots of options for coloring these pieces, but ultimately I decided to go with the markers. So I've got Old Olive, Boho Blue, and Misty Moonlight, which coordinate with the paper packet. I didn't have the Balmy Blue, which I, for some reason, must have missed ordering that color. So I pulled in my Prismacolor Premier marker, which is light cerulean blue, which seems to match quite well. And I also pulled in a Copic marker, which is Cool Gray number 0. And I'm going to use that for some blending as well. So I'm going to start here with the Boho Blue, and I'm just adding in my darker shading color. What I like about this particular stamp is it has a lot of the black lines where the shading would be. So you can see I'm just doing a little bit of a flicking motion here to pull out where the color or the shading spots would be in the flower, which makes it super easy for this particular technique for adding color to these particular flowers. And what I'm going to do is then once I get that done, I'm going to bring in that cool gray number 0. Because as we know, when we're doing coloring techniques, whether it's a white dog, a white flower, white is generally not true white. So this gray is so light that I can use that to blend out some of that blue color and then use it to shade in the rest of the flower, and it's still going to look like a white flower. So I really like the way that this turned out. So it looks like, a blue flower kind of fading out into white petals, and it just really gave it a really nice effect with this. So you'll see when I add this onto the layout how nicely it looks. But I also decided that I couldn't have all of my flowers looking the same with this. It did need a little bit more color, but I didn't want to bring in additional colors to the layout because I really wanted to keep it monochromatic. So I'm adding just a little bit darker shading into the creases here, and that's going to wrap up this particular flower. And then I'm going to show you how I did one of the leaves as well. So that just turned out so gorgeous. So I'm going to do basically the same technique on the leaf. So I'm starting with the light old olive, and I'm just flicking that out towards the end of the leaf, and then I'm going to flick it back inward. So you can see where I leave that blank space for kind of what would be the highlight of the leaf. And then I will bring in that cool gray again and blend those two together, which again will not leave it completely white, but you'll have that nice blend together. And it actually lightens up the old olive a little bit. So it softens up that color, and then it blends that out. So I really like how those colors turned out by adding the cool grays. Off camera, I did color in the rest of the flowers, and I ended up using that Prismacolor marker to substitute with the Balmy Blue. So you can see that I have some fully colored flowers and some partially colored flowers. So for my title, I'm going to use Carol Jean's name. So she has she goes by her first and middle name, Carol Jean. So I wanted to make it 2 rows, and I showed you several different options that I was debating on. I really liked the blue alphabet, but it didn't quite match. So I landed on this wood grain alphabet that I've had in my stash for years. So I'm really trying to use up a lot of things that I already have as opposed to buying a bunch of new stuff right now. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in my ruler and make a couple pencil lines for where I'm going to add in both her first name and her middle name. So I'm measuring, how tall is the alphabet, and then where I need to make the top row for the name Carol, and then of course Jean will go on the second line. And what I have found when I'm doing words and names like this is it's easier for me to do them backwards as long as I don't misspell something. But I know where I want it to end up, so I'm going to start with the N and spell the word backwards. And that way I get my placing exactly where I want it to be. And of course I've got my pencil line there to help me line it up at the bottom. So that way I can then go to the top, and then I want it to be staggered just a little bit, so I can just start again from the right side and go backwards to the left side and spell out her first name. So that's a little tip that helps me. I don't know if it will help you, but I will say that as I've done this in the past, if I'm not careful, I definitely have misspelled many a word. So it's a good idea to have your word written out on scrap paper off to the side or something so that you can follow letter by letter, just so that you don't make some accidental mistakes. So now I'm going to reposition all of my embellishment flowers. And I originally had this one on the left down a little bit closer to the photo, but I end up moving it a little bit up more into that little nook and cranny there in where her name is. So I also, for all of these layouts for this family album I'm doing, is I'm adding their date of birth. So I brought in these little alphabet and number, I guess they're stickers. They're kind of little dots, and I'm going to put the date of birth, her date of birth, under her name. So I'm again starting from the right and moving backwards. So I have the year here, and then I'm using my marker just to put that little dash in between the year and the day and then the month. So I was really happy with how that turned out as well, because these letters matched my blues quite nicely. And then I can just add the marker for the little dash and the date. And I was pretty happy with that. So I really liked how I was able to pull lots of different embellishments and bits and pieces into this layout to make it all come together. So super happy with that. And now I'm just going to use my rub and remove eraser and erase all of those pencil lines. This is a great tool for adhesive, but it is also a great eraser as well. So here I added my journaling. So I just hand wrote in her husband's name, children and grandchildren's name, and then I'm pulling in some additional embellishment pieces from my stash. And you can see that I did color those again with the same blue markers, some of the lighter color in the Boho Blue, and then I did some in the darker for the Misty Moonlight, just to give it a little bit of variety in the different shades of blue, because that's really what this layout is all about, and being the monochromatic and the shades of the blue. So you'll see that reflected here as well with the different shades of the blue. So as I go through and get these all adhered down, let me just give you a little bit reminder. If you are liking what you're seeing today, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate your support in supporting my channel and helping promote that. So please do that. It is totally free, doesn't cost you anything, and only takes a second to do. So thank you so much for doing that as well. And you can see I'm using my tweezers. These are really easy to pull out of the carrier sheet, but sometimes it's just easier to have the tweezers on hand, because I'm going to need those to use with the glue and get them placed down as well. So it's super easy just to pull those right out with the tweezers, add the glue, and then put them right in place. Now, as I finish up adding all of these little embellishments, the other thing that I wanted to do is, you'll notice some of these flowers have the little hole in the center of the flowers. So I also brought in my clear sparkles. And what I love about the clear sparkles is that you can use your alcohol markers and make them any color that you'd like to make them. So again, I used the clear sparkles, and I added the blue from my markers, and I believe I used the Boho Blue. And just, I'll show you here in a second, I used the marker and colored them, and I made them blue to coordinate with the layout. So I did several of them, and I'm just showing you one here on camera, and you can kind of see there on the white paper the difference. So it really gives you a lot of versatility on what you can do with the clear sparkles by changing them to coordinate with any color that you need them to coordinate. So the first thing I'm going to do is add them to the centers of all of my flowers, just to fill up that empty hole. And then I'm going to add a few more to all of my clusters, just to add a little bit of extra sparkle to the layout. And that, once I get completed, is going to wrap up the rest of this layout. So putting a couple here and there for each cluster, and we'll wrap everything up. So again, I appreciate you guys joining me in this adventure and supporting my channel. And we'll give you a couple close-ups here so that you can see all of the dimension that I added to the layout. Of course, if you've been around for a while, you know I love to pop things up and have lots of dimension in my layout, so you can see that here. Super happy with how that turned out, and I appreciate you guys watching today.